Hello everyone and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We join you today from the Eastern Research Station at Haskell for a trip back in time in this corn demonstration plot, 100 years back, to compare early day Oklahoma farming practices to what we're using now. Just over an acre of field corn stands ready to harvest, but this is neither ordinary corn nor an ordinary demonstration plot.
We have 3 heirloom type varieties, anywhere from 1840 to early 1900s, and then we have 3 new hybrid varieties that have just been released here in the last year or so.
That's 6 varieties, 3 heirloom and 3 modern, planted by Brian Pugh, Northeast Area Agronomist for the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service.
Under both new management, 2014 management practices, and 1914 management practices.
2 styles of farming, a century apart, all to commemorate the Centennial of Extension in Oklahoma and the United States. Brian says Extension's roots inspired him.
In the infancy of Extension, the way that Extension got the information out to farmers across the United States was through corn clubs with children. And the children would take that information home to their parents, and that later became 4-H clubs. So I thought, what better way than with a corn crop?
To get started, he did some research.
I actually found a 1915 publication from Kansas that went through variety trials and different management practices of the day and showed which ways were best to plant corn, and it's so far different from what we recommend today.
For example, a century ago, 3-foot by 3-foot plant spacing was common. Nowadays, it's much closer, more in the neighborhood of 30 inches by 7 inches. As a result, everything's more uniform and the mature crop is smaller. It's not just the spacing and the resulting size of the plant and the ear that's changed in the past 100 years. We've learned a lot about the soil as well.
When I was researching this plot before we actually installed this plot here, I did find, as I said, a 1915 Kansas Research Station publication. And the real interesting part, having a soil fertility background myself, was that there was basically 2 sentences in that whole publication about soil fertility. And it said if the plants look unthrifty after they come up out of the ground, add 8 tons of manure per acre. And that was the only recommendation made for soil fertility. And it's easy to see how far we've come from that now. Our knowledge of pH, our knowledge of phosphorus and potassium, the green seeker technology, which is revolutionary today, that allows us to more closely predict how much nitrogen we need to make optimal yield. These plants here in the older management style actually did not need any nitrogen, but again, we attribute some of that to wider plant spacings, and each plant is able to pick up more nitrogen from the soil.
As the senior superintendent at the Eastern Research Station, Rodney Ferris is here every day. He got to help tackle the weeds that emerged as a result of the 1914 management style.
It was a lot of hard work hoeing that field, because the weeds was pretty tall because we couldn't get in there when it had rained, kept raining and raining. So we had to kind of wait till it kind of dried up so we could hoe the weeds out.
Evidence of just how far extension and agriculture have come, which for Brian may just be the best part of the whole demonstration.
And being able to see the advances that we've made through extension, research, and teaching for producers in Oklahoma, and actually being a part of that, knowing that I am a part of that, and maybe in 100 years they'll do one of these again and they'll look back and say, wow, it's so much easier now than what it was then.
I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet Weather Report. Wednesday was a day of change across Oklahoma. An air temperature map from 4:10 Wednesday afternoon had Bernieville at 100 degrees and a number of other Mesonet sites in the upper 90s, the dark red map areas. Crossing into the orange map areas, temperatures were 20 degrees cooler in the mid to upper 70s. Winds Wednesday changed across the state as the cold front went through, shifting from the south in the southeast to winds out of the north, northwest of a line from Ardmore to Ada to Weber Falls. And we saw big changes in humidity Tuesday afternoon. Humidities went lower in the southeast from the afternoon heat, jumped up in the band of cooler air just behind the wind shift, the green band on our map. The orange map areas in the northwest indicated drier air farther behind the front. Tuesday, September 9th was a hot one across the state. Only 2 Mesonet sites fell below 90, Jay and Westville, and the heat index was 100 or higher at 43 Mesonet sites Tuesday. What a change to have morning temperatures 40 to 50 degrees cooler than our Tuesday highs. Here's Gary with the latest drought monitor.
Thanks, Al, and good morning, everybody. As you're watching this, you probably realize that fall is definitely in the air. And hopefully you've gotten some rain this week to alleviate some of those dry conditions. Now, speaking of the dry conditions, let's take a look at the latest U.S. Drought Monitor report and see what the state looks like for this week. Shows more improvements in northwestern and northeastern Oklahoma, but also some intensification across east central Oklahoma. Unfortunately, still too much red and orange on that map, especially across southwestern and west central Oklahoma and up in the Panhandle. I thought we could take a look at the conditions of our pastures and rangelands at this time of the year, so let's take a look at these maps from the National Agricultural Statistics Service of the USDA. The first is the percent of pasture and rangeland considered to be in good or very good condition for the state of Oklahoma. You can see it's 45%. So that's pretty good, especially if you can compare it to the 28% in Texas or the 19% in New Mexico. And of course, California in its horrible drought is only at 15%. Now, the percent of pasture and rangeland in poor or very poor condition is only 19% in Oklahoma, which is a great number for this time of year, especially considering the bad spring that we had and also the hot, dry August. We can thank those improved pasture and rangeland numbers to the late spring and summer rains that we saw this year. Here are the totals since May 21st from the Mesonet, the famous date when the rains came back this year. Still some dry areas from west central, southern, and east central Oklahoma, and the Panhandle, of course. Now, when we look at the departure from normal for that same period, since May 21st, we see most areas saw some surplus of at least 2 inches to more than 6 inches in other areas. Now, the statewide average from that May 21st through September 10th period was 15 inches, or about 1.7 inches above normal, and that's the 26th wettest such period since at least 1921. Well, now that fall's here and the temperatures have started to drop, now we just have to hope that those rains start to come back and really put another big dent in this drought. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Wheat prices have fallen almost $2.50 since May, and Kim, what does this mean?
Well, let's go back to February of 2011 when wheat prices were $9.90. From February 11 until May of 12, they fell to $6, hit that $6 level. They went back up again by November of 12 to $9.35. They fell to $6 from there by January of 2014. Since May of this year, wheat prices have fallen from $8.54 back down to that $6 level, and we've been pounding that $6 level for about the last three weeks.
Okay, Kim, do you think that we'll see those post-wheat harvest 2010 numbers again?
Well, it's possible. Right now, in the short run, we're moving in a sideways pattern between $6 and $6.70. If we break through that, say next Tuesday, close below it, then I think we're going to go on down. The support levels I've got below 6 are about $5.50, then to $5, and then to $4.50. I think $4.50 would probably be close to the bottom price that we'd see, say, over the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay, we didn't have a great wheat crop in Oklahoma this last year. Shouldn't the prices be going up?
You'd expect that with a below average U.S. wheat crop, with below average U.S. ending stocks, with below average, well below average hard red winter wheat stocks. But as we've discussed recently on SUNUP, our price is determined on the world market, and the world is producing a lot of wheat. Okay,
let's talk about the WASDE report. This just came out this last week. What all did you find in it?
Well, if you look at the report, there are some surprises in it. We was talking about world wheat production. They increased it from 26.1 billion bushels to 26.5 billion bushels. And I think that's a surprise to the market. World ending stocks increased from 7.1 to 7.2 billion bushels. U.S. ending stocks was increased from 663 to 698, so an increase. All negative information there that could have a negative impact and help us break that $6 level. If you look at corn, that production was raised to 14.4 billion bushels. In August it was 14 even. The trade was expecting 14.3. Corn ending stocks, the WASDE did have higher corn use, so ending stocks stayed at about 2 billion, about where they were in August, and trade was expecting 2. You look at soybeans, but with a higher production, negative corn. You look at soybeans, again, increased production. 3.91 billion bushels. Last month was 3.8. Ending stocks to 475 million. Last month with 430. Again, negative information for wheat, corn, and beans.
Okay, what are the price predictions according to Kim Anderson?
Well, we're going to watch that on wheat. We're going to watch the that $6 level. If we break that and we're down below it on Tuesday of next week, then I think we're going to take it on down another 20 to 30 cents, maybe down to that $5.50 level. Corn prices, they were already weak. The ending stocks didn't change. The USDA yields were above the trade expectations. Might get a little hit on corn, but I don't think a big hit there. Soybeans, I think it'll take a bigger hit than either corn or wheat.
Okay, if producers were doing the third, and a third at harvest, should they still be moving into that second, third right now?
Yeah, well, I'd still be following that. The second, third should be late September, early October. I might wait to see if we come back a little bit. It's wet up in Canada, northern tier of the U.S., and those crops aren't going to be as good as quality as expected.
Okay, thank you much. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Undoubtedly that you have seen the commercial for a credit card that ends with the statement or the question, "What's in your wallet?" Well, let's rephrase that on today's Cow-Calf Corner. Let's ask, what's in your hay? I think that is a very critical question that also will lead to what's going to be in your wallet next spring after you feed the hay. The difference in forage quality has such a huge impact on our supplementation needs that it's very, very important that we take the time and spend just a few dollars getting a hay test on our forages so that we know how to best supplement it this winter. Let's use a couple of examples. Say, for instance, we have some low quality hay, something that tests about 5% crude protein, and we're going to feed that to our gestating cows this winter before they calve. Well, if we have a 1,200-pound cow with that 5% low quality hay, she can only consume about 1.5% of her body weight every day if she has free choice access to that hay. And with that only 5% at 1.5% of her body weight, she only gets about 0.9 pounds of crude protein every day, which is less than half of what she really needs. Compare that then with a cow that has access to some better quality hay, something that tests about 9% crude protein. What you would find there is that cow can consume more of it, about 2% of her body weight, and since it's higher in protein, then she's receiving close to 2 pounds of crude protein every day, and that should meet her protein needs until after she calves. So it makes so much difference as to whether you're going to need to supplement that 5% crude protein hay, and it'll take something like about 5 pounds of a 20 or 2.5 pounds of a 40% crude protein pellet in order to make up the difference if we have that lower quality hay. Knowing what's in your hay affects how much supplement, what kind of supplement you're going to buy this winter, and will really affect your bottom line. So I'm going to ask you once again, what's in your hay? We look forward to seeing you next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
It's a busy time of year for Oklahoma wheat producers who are putting their winter wheat in the ground. And for many, the option of no-till is growing in popularity. So today we want to look at some ongoing no-till research. Here's SUNUP's Austin Moore.
No-till takes patience. It can take years for a soil to recover from conventional tillage to the point where the benefits of no-till are fully realized. These test plots south of Perry provide a perfect example. Here, a wheat and sorghum rotation has been maintained on no-till plots that are 8 and 2 years old.
What we can do now is look at how the age of no-till affects crop performance. So we have 8-year-old no-till or 2-year-old no-till soils. And what we found is where we have this 8-year-old no-till ground, last summer at least, we grew 135 bushel sorghum. This plot, or the younger no-till, was 110 bushel sorghum, so a 25 bushel difference in yield. And then we had wheat on these plots to the north, 20 bushels this past winter on the old no-till ground and 10 bushels on the 2-year-old no-till. So what we're seeing is the benefit of, or the long-term benefits of no-till. And so that's a general story we see in our studies. For summer crops, we get a benefit of about 10% on our grain yields when we go to no-till, even right into the system first year. And then in the wheat, we really don't see much of a yield benefit. So it's the summer rotational crops where we're getting the benefit of the improved soil water holding capacity and soil characteristics that are making more grain.
Warren also showed us how the two plots compare below ground.
So what we have here is, this is ground that has not been tilled in 8 years, and we can look and see what that soil looks like. So we still got the nice red color, and what we find is that soil breaks apart even fairly readily. This is not a great condition because right there at about 2 inches we have kind of this surface, but you do see some biopores coming through there, you see some roots, you see that crack. But then the real, and below this, there's really no difference in the soil character between the two treatments. But when you look at it from this direction, you start to see that those dark colorings. This soil is kind of friable and what we call granular, and we push on it readily or slightly and it'll break apart, and you can see all those roots. And some of them are roots from the current crop, and then some of them are old. And then you see here, that is a platy structure, which we don't like. But it's better than no structure at all, because as that soil wets, the water can at least get into those voids that are created, and then it breaks apart. This is 2 years old, and you're starting to get at the very near surface, you're getting that character, but you'll see that white, that lighter colored material, that is an old crust from when we first started this no-till system that's accumulated, and so that's problematic. But you'll see that biopore there, right there at the tip of my finger. So we're getting some biopore development, but there's essentially no structure. When I pull that apart, they're just clods that break apart in irregular fashion, and they're fairly strong clods. And so there is, although, and you're starting to get a little platy structure here, so improvements are coming to us, but they're just not there like the older soil is. You'll see these big clods. But this is a good example of a big clod. On the other plot, although there was some platy structure, you didn't really find these big clods in the top 2 inches of soil. And the reason why these are problematic is that the water hits this, and it must move into the micropores of this soil to get into the ground, because there's just not any pore volume for it to flow into. Water flows quicker than it is pulled into micropores, and so this ground will take water more or less readily than the ground in the 8-year-old no-till.
That translates into yields, and in turn, profits.
We've made $200 more revenue with 30 or 25 bushels more sorghum last summer and 10 bushels more wheat last summer due to the improvements in the top 2 inches of the no-till, the 8-year-old no-till soil.
If you'd like to learn more about tillage options, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu. Joining us once again, our Ag Policy Specialist, Jody Campeacci. Jody, today let's talk about the Livestock Forage Program. And really, first of all, just kind of give us a snapshot of what that program really is.
The Livestock Forage Program is a livestock disaster assistance program to help livestock producers when they have periods of grazing losses due to drought. And this program was reauthorized in the last Farm Bill. It was part of the 2008 Farm Bill, and then it was reauthorized in the 2014 Farm Bill. It goes back and covers losses for 2012, 2013, and 2014.
All right, so there have recently been some changes to that program, I understand. What's happened there?
Okay, so what's happened, when it first came out, there were a lot of questions about contract growers who actually didn't own the cattle but owned or leased the forage and took cattle in on a rate of gain basis. Those producers did not previously qualify. There's been a slight change in interpretation of the rules. Now those producers can qualify.
Okay, so clearly they're going to have to go through some kind of hoops to get that done. What do they need to do?
Okay, so here's the next thing. Written agreements are required for those losses. Now, in Oklahoma, many producers, many contract growers do not actually have a written agreement in place for 2012, 2013, and even in 2014. They had oral agreements. They'll need to go back and write out a written agreement, and the contract grower and the livestock owner will need to sign that agreement. There are certain things, of course, that need to be included in there, such as one thing in particular, a mortality clause. A couple of other things that are very important, and so they need to look into that before kind of figuring out what needs to go into the written agreement.
Now, this really is a lot of producers, especially in southern Oklahoma.
Yes, this affects a lot of producers in our state that, again, previously weren't eligible, and now they are. It's just they need to make sure that they follow the guidelines of, what needs to be, how the wording needs to be in the written agreement. And OSU Extension will provide more information as soon as a little bit more clarification comes out on those details.
Now, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about crop insurance dates. We've got a few deadlines coming up here over the next couple of months.
Yeah, coming up at the end of September, September 30th is the deadline for insurance on our fall planted crops. So that includes winter wheat. Also, the new supplemental crop insurance, SCO, that deadline for winter wheat is September 30th as well.
All right. Now, you've got a lot of information online that kind of explains some of this more. You can find a link to that information at our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Now with some useful ag apps for your smartphone or mobile device, here's Brian Arnell.
One of the most simple apps that are made are the calculator apps. In this section, I want to go through some applications that have a few inputs and you get a real handy output. The first one we want to talk about is the Ag PhD Harvest Loss app. We can go into this app and we can choose a crop, choose how many seeds per pound, and then how many seeds we find per square foot behind the combine. We can put our crop price in, and then what it shows you is actually how many pounds of seed you're losing per acre, how many bushels you're losing per acre, and then what is that economic value that you're losing by not having your combine set right or having too much coming out of the back end. The second app will be nutrient removal. There's several nutrient uptake, nutrient removal apps that are available. One is the Mosaic nutrient removal app. You can go in there and you select a crop and it'll give you how much N, P2O5, K2O, mag, and sulfur is being removed in that crop. This app has a lot of crops that we use in Oklahoma, so Bermuda grass, corn, wheat. The one thing I don't like about this app is that it has a stagnant yield level. If we go back though and go to another app, Fertilizer Removal by Ag PhDs, you get into that app and it will allow you to set a specific level of yield. Now these values that these apps get are not to the pinpoint accuracy. There is some plus or minus because the data is not that concise. It's going to depend on environment, it'll depend on location, and depend on fertility levels. For those outside of Oklahoma, growing degree days is very important. For the summer crop specifically, it's commonly used in corn and soybean production, and I'm seeing it brought down more into Oklahoma as we're scouting. Growing degree days is just specifically the heat units. How hot has it been? How many growth units has that crop seen? The app that I prefer is again, it's an Ag PhD app. It's the GDU calculator. Within it, you can go in there by zip code, place your zip code, and it will give you the growing degree heat units for that zip code from your start to finish date. The last one that I'll talk about is the canola seeding calculator. Not only can you put in your germ per bag, but you can put in how many of those plants you think will actually get up and survive through our winter. Then it'll give you a live plants per square meter and a live plants per acre, and then foot a row, live plants per foot a row. But the big number it delivers is that calculated seeding rate in pounds per acre. There are several other calculators that are available that I have in my calculator section. For more information, go to the SUNUP website at sunup.okstate.edu.
That'll do it for us this week. From the Eastern Research Station at Haskell, I'm Lyndall Stout. We'll see you next time at SUNUP. We leave you today with the Oklahoma State University Cowboy Marching Band's halftime tribute to Extension's Centennial from last Saturday's game, and a special tip of the hat to the band's announcer Chuck Lester, whose late father, Charlie Lester, was a longtime Extension educator in Noble County.
The Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service is dedicated in 2014 to celebrating its 100th anniversary of extending knowledge and changing lives. Along with teaching and research, Extension forms the triangle that is a fundamental part of OSU's land-grant mission. The Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service, a state agency headquartered on campus, employs more than 600 educators, faculty, and staff, both here in Stillwater and in all 77 Oklahoma counties. Please help us recognize OSU Extension's Centennial. And now, let's all ride on!